Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the kickoff of the Fall 2017 Geospatial Forum. I'm Ross, Director of the Center for Geospatial Analytics, and it's thrilled to see everybody here. Dr. Baran is going to be introducing our guest, Jim. So I'll pass it to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross, and welcome everyone. For this fall, we have a great lineup of speakers, so I hope all of you are going to make as many as possible of this forum. But today, it's a great pleasure to introduce to you Jim Alberque, who is actually City of Raleigh GIS and Engagement Technology Manager. He leads talented teams of web developers and technologists at City of Raleigh. He has been with the city for 4 years in various technology management positions. And his teams have developed a dozen of digital solutions for both in-house and public use. Prior to joining Raleigh, Jim was most recently with the City of Boston as GIS program or project manager. Right? I had the privilege to work with Jim last year during our Envision Raleigh project, which focused on developing a 3D web platform for public engagement that allowed visualization of alternative development scenarios. During this time, I've known Jim as to be extremely professional, and I've been impressed with his vision actually for the project and in general. So, without further ado,
that's it.
Jim Alberque, please welcome me. Join me.
Thank you. Dr. Barn. Again, my name is Jim Alberque. I'm with the City of Raleigh, GIS and Engagement Technology Manager. So I wanted to start a little bit about me, talk a little bit about the program, talk about how we use GIS to manage our operations internally, and then talk a little bit, something I'm a little bit more passionate about around partnerships and innovation. So I'll kind of breeze through the first set around operations in our program and kind of focus a little bit more on the innovation and partnerships. So the things that I'm passionate about. So the story I like to tell is if you can think back 10 years, living in Boston, I leave my apartment and my car is gone. My car's not there. My car was stolen. And so I went down to the police station and I said, hey, my name is Jim Alberque. I have a black car. This is the license plate. And they said, yeah, we'll look for it. And as soon as we find it, we'll let you know. But we're not going to find it. And so, you know, I filled out an insurance claim. And 30 days later, I got 2 pieces of mail. And one was from the parking clerk that said, hey, you parked 2 streets away and you never paid your ticket. And the next one was the insurance claim that said, hey, we bought your car from you. And I love that car. And it was devastating to me that a government organization could be so siloed that I could tell somebody, hey, look for my car. Somebody right down the street could find it. And they never connected those 2 things. So those are some of the things that I feel like in government we can kind of drive innovation and drive kind of connectivity of information and use GIS as a platform for integration, using location and geography to integrate systems. Hopefully somebody gets this joke. Anybody get this joke? No, huh? Unfortunately. I was sort of, so this is a Saturday Night Live. You should look it up. More cowbell. Thank you. You know, again, I'm a GIS guy. There are very few problems that the city faces that I don't believe geospatial approaches or geospatial technology cannot add value. So a little bit about Raleigh. As was mentioned earlier, I'm originally from the city of Boston. I moved down here 4 years ago. And one of the things that was exciting was just the population pressure that was being felt here. It was, you know, every magazine I read, everybody was talking about how great it was to live and work and play here. And so just some information about the numbers is we're just under 500,000 people in the city of Raleigh. The city employs just under 4,000 people, and we have a $1.2 billion budget with a B, yeah. So the Carolina demographic information came out just a couple weeks ago, and I found it interesting. I tweeted it to my sister and my parents that if you look at the entire state, all the cities, whether it's net population gain or percentage population gain, seem to be right around here. There's a lot of people coming. The Wake Transit Plan came out and said 63 people a day are moving into Wake County, which is the equivalent of like a Peter Pan bus. So every day a Peter Pan bus shows up, everybody gets off, and no one leaves. So, so two numbers I wanted to kind of highlight is in the last 6 years, while we weren't paying attention, we absorbed the town of Apex, right? The town of Apex showed up and moved into our city, and we didn't even really know what was going on. So again, the population pressure that we're feeling is both exciting and terrifying. So this is, again, just a way to kind of use GIS. This is dot density for race, and it's kind of interesting. It's telling about where people are living and who's living where. So what do we do in the city? So we do a whole bunch of stuff. We, you know, public safety, fire, E911. We do things like urban mechanics sort of stuff, parking and pick up trash and make bike lanes and greenways, run a bus system, traffic management or lack thereof, deliver water and build streets, plan for our city, manage stormwater, permit and inspect new structures. So if we looked at the program of GIS in the city, right now we have about 75 desktop users across all the departments. We manage about 150 enterprise data sets. So those are data sets that are shared across the organization. And more than 35,000 folks use our online platforms on a monthly basis. And we are either directly or indirectly supporting almost all of these services that are being delivered. So the model from a staffing perspective that we have in the city is that the Enterprise GIS group is there's four kind of full-time staff. I manage the team, but there is a web developer, a data manager, an analyst, and a specialist. And we're responsible for basically the care and feeding of those 150 data sets, as well as the technology, the underlying technology. There are some of the bigger departments, Parks and Rec, Public Utilities, Stormwater, Solid Waste. They have their own internal GIS resources to kind of meet those business needs that they have. So a little bit about the history. So Raleigh was actually a really early adopter of GIS. I believe it was, I think it was 2004 that it was, no, maybe 1994, sorry. 1994, the program was launched with a massive investment in data and technology. I don't remember, it was like a geomedia platform that they were using back then. But they made investments not only in the city, but also in the county. They also made investments and started to use GIS, leverage GIS, not only to just map data, but also integrate into business processes, whether it's permitting or work orders or work management, et cetera. So it's actually a fairly mature program. I would say the state of North Carolina is actually mature in its entirety, has done a really good job of collaborating, coordinating across local government, counties, the state, et cetera. I was actually very impressed coming from Boston. You know, I had kind of lower expectations, but it was pretty impressive. So when we think about what we do on a day-to-day basis, this team of 5 of us, again, we manage data. This is everything from planimetrics, cadastral data, topo data. We have an annual orthophotography program, so we pay every year. We get an annual flight done, and 1/4 of the city is redone from a planimetrics and topographic perspective, which again it's almost unheard of from an investment. We make massive investments in this data, and then we either automate or manually manage a bunch of operational and project level data. So software, we're trying to take the best tool for the job perspective. There's a lot of good software out there. we are a traditional Esri organization, and so many of our staff are comfortable, familiar, and productive in the Esri kind of suite. But there are other staff where they're using some more open source technology, whether it be on the desktop, server, database, etc. Hardware, we do kind of collaborate with our infrastructure team on hardware. We're trying to be somewhat progressive. We're trying to use both on-premise hardware as well as commodity hardware. So up in the cloud, platforms as services, AWS, Heroku, Rackspace, etc. We're also using both Windows and Linux servers. Platforms right now, we're kind of using this ArcGIS platform as a service, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And the staff. So when we think of staff, we think of our power users, which is both internal IT, some of the departmental users, and then there are other folks who are kind of casual GIS users, whether it's through desktop, web apps, etc. And then there's this kind of community at large that uses GIS that we try and allow them to use GIS without knowing they're using GIS. And then, what's that?
That's the future.
Yes, exactly. And hopefully I have some really good examples of that. And then services, we're on board with this open data movement, and GIS represents a humongous portfolio of our data. And so we're using services, web services, to expose our kind of enterprise data. And then we integrate with systems, again, in an attempt to allow people to use GIS data without knowing they're using it. If it can kind of be in the background, we use integrations to do that. So this is that platform as a service kind of model. I kind of stole this, where we have kind of this hosted platform. We have servers on premise, we have servers in the cloud, there's desktop, there's applications, there's configure not code applications, custom applications, etc. And it all just works together. And we're not too far from this kind of model here, where data is kind of mastered in one place, kind of published everywhere, and everyone has access regardless of the actual desktop application that they're using or web application that they're using. So this is sort of the thing I get a little bit more excited about. Does anybody like this map, by the way, underneath it? I spent a lot of time on that. So smart cities. So smart cities and innovation. This is kind of the buzzword around municipal governments these days. And it used to be called Gov 2.0, and then it was called digital transformation, and now it's called smart cities, and tomorrow it'll be called something else. But it's just a way to kind of conceptualize doing things in a different way. How do we leverage kind of new modern technology to help drive innovation inside of an organization like government, which traditionally is resistant to change? So one of the areas that we're focusing on is mobility. So data management, work management. How do we empower our staff with the power of devices that they have in their pockets or walk around with to automate their work? And so there's a couple of examples I wanted to kind of highlight. One is council was getting feedback from constituents on the cleanliness of downtown. And so the solid waste folks, their traditional out of the gate thinking was, let's give them a pad of paper and a pencil and have them go, and as they're collecting, as they're grabbing trash bags, let's have them write down where they're seeing trash and what they're seeing. So they wanted to do it the following week. And so we said, hey, if there's a way that we could just kind of ask them to snap a picture, capture what it was, we could do some interesting stuff with the data later. And so this is the result of that, is that without kind of a whole bunch of human intervention, we're able to collect data in kind of a more efficient way, provide some analysis, and this is, right, I'm not a solid waste guy, but this says something to me. This, I know kind of how to remediate this. I know that if I put a big belly trash can in the center of that yellow, it's probably going to move the needle, which is exactly what happened. And so then we had that same technology. We can do that, repeat that process again and see if it actually made a difference, which it did, but it highlighted a new issue. So that's one case. The other is just using that same kind of idea, we got a lot of good PR from that internal to the organization. And so as soon as there was a massive rain event, my phone started ringing saying, hey, listen, we have cops, EMS, public safety folks out in the community that are babysitting downed limbs or downed wires. Is there a way that we can sort of inventory this in an easy way? Here's a spreadsheet. And I was like, no, I don't want a spreadsheet. How about we send you, just tweet out this link to download this thing to allow them to inventory that, and then we can create a work process to close those so we know where we are at any one point. So again, really, really simple to put together. The kind of consumerization of technology is such that this isn't tough to do, and it really changes how kind of the business is done in the city. So the next thing is kind of IoT, real-time technology. So this is interesting for me that every time a new asset is kind of installed in our city, sometimes we don't even know it, but it's got sensors out the ears. It's detecting MAC addresses and temperature and how many people walked by, and if it's full, if it's malfunctioning, how much money it collected. And so a lot of cities don't know what to do with that information. They don't even know how to ingest it, deal with it, etc. And so what we're trying to do is just, what are the assets we have out there? What are they reporting? What are the things they're telling us? And then is there any operational intelligence that we can gain from that? So the example on the screen is, the blue dots are the parking meters, the red and green dots are the spaces. And so we can tell at any one point, what is the status of a parking space from a payment perspective. Unfortunately, we can't tell if there's an actual car there, but we can tell whether the car is paid for that spot or not. Our big belly trash cans, they report whether they're full, sort of full, malfunctioning, etc. So we can start to use that data to help to drive efficiencies in how trash routes are created and how they're managed. I was actually just driving today that our garbage trucks have sensors. They have AVL, like our whole fleet has AVL, so we can tell kind of where they are. But our garbage trucks have telemetry on them that registers every time it grabs a trash can, picks it up, takes a picture of it as it's dumping it. It's, in theory, supposed to soon be able to kind of calculate weight. So there's, again, whole bunch of opportunities there to do interesting things, efficiencies, change how we're doing business, etc. And our EV charging stations, we have a dashboard where we can say what's being used when, what's the charges that are being completed, how many cars have been serviced, etc., to help drive future deployments of EV charging stations. Citizen engagement. So a few years ago, the City of Raleigh did a massive rezoning where they basically rezoned about 60% of their land area. And as you can imagine, the constituents were fairly concerned about what it meant for them, right? In a very selfish way. I would feel the same way. And so, right, this is strike zone technology for GIS web application, which is just put in your address, what was the old zoning, what's the new zoning, what could I do before, what can I do now? Very informative, allows people to discover information, that's great, and that would be normally what we would do. But what if we added the ability for them to drop a comment during a period to say, hey, you know what, I'm really concerned about the density that this zoning allows, and I'd like to talk more about it. And then the city to be able to, in a digital way, respond to that feedback. So, again, the traditional way we do this is we have public meetings, and if you're available on Tuesday at 7 o'clock, from 7 to 7:30, we're happy to hear your comments. If you're not, you could write us a letter if you want. But other than that, there's no other way. So there's got to be a way through digital platforms to just kind of enable the conversation to be had in front of Game of Thrones on a Sunday night or something. And so this was wildly popular because not only did it allow you to have a conversation with the city, but it allowed your neighbors to also see that comment and either echo what you said or kind of leave a different comment. And so over a few month period of time, we ended up with like 1,800 comments. All of them had a response from the city. Again, wildly popular. And there is much more appetite to do more like that. An example of doing more like that is because we built it using kind of standard technology, we can now share that code and reuse that application. So Wake County used it to get feedback around a FEMA flood zone remapping. And so it was the same function, just over different data. They didn't get quite as many comments, but still easily were able to redeploy it for a different function. So 3D. So 3D is, Dr. Barron had said, we worked on a project with her team earlier this year that, yes, we did. And so kind of some of the baseline of that is the state did a massive LiDAR project. I think this is a little old. They did one, I think, is this the latest one, 2015?
This latest one.
Yeah, so 2015, really high level of density on the points, really good data. And so there was some interest in using the data from a number of different perspectives. One is urban design and planning, another is stormwater. And so we can start to do things like, what is the shadow impact of current conditions? If you are doing any development, especially downtown or in Glenwood South, the constituents are very sensitive to what does this do to my access to sunlight. And so we can start to use this technology to help to drive kind of data-driven conversations so that it's not Mary who's like, hey, you're going to ruin my life and I will never get any sun ever again. And so in this case, there was a proposal to do massive density in kind of just south of downtown. And so again, at a quick kind of back of the envelope manner, we're able to kind of share some information about what it might mean from a shadow perspective. So open data is another area that we spend a lot of time in as part of our Smart Cities initiative. So what we were able to do is we collaborate pretty closely with Wake County. We're able to federate across open data platforms. So if you're looking for data, you don't need to know that is jurisdictional to Wake County versus Raleigh. You don't care about that, and you shouldn't have to care about that. That you can basically discover data on either side, and you don't. It's kind of transparent to you. So I talked a little bit about open data platforms. As much as I wish you guys would all go to our open data platform, you're not, and we know it. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to inject open data into your experience. Where are you? You're on Waze. You're on Yelp. You're on other applications. So how do we get that data there? Because you're not coming to our open data site, no matter how good of a PR job we do. And so what we do, we do things like take our road closures and just kind of feed it up to Waze, just make it available, talk to Waze about what is a format that you will kind of ingest our data and share it with kind of your customers. Wake County did something around health inspections where they shared their health inspections, and you can get through Yelp the latest health inspection data for restaurants. So hopefully I'll get a chance to show you a little bit about this. So if you go to our city, RaleighNC.gov right now, and you search for something, parks, I give you a list of links. I give you a PDF. First is the name of a PDF. The second one is a document. The third one is the parks homepage. The fifth one's a PDF. The seventh one's a PDF. But I wanted to go play basketball, right? That's why I look for parks. I don't care about the 15-year strategic plan for parks. I wanted to, right, I got my friend here. I wanted to know where a basketball court was. So this is consumers' experience with that, which is if I want to know Boston Red Sox score, I just type Boston Red Sox. I don't even have to type Boston. If I just type Red Sox, the box score just pops up. That is our constituents' experience, and we need to figure out how to be able to mimic that experience or drive towards that experience. So we think that if we can start to inject open data into, if I have data around parks, and you let me know where you are, and I know all the facilities, and I know the events, how about I just kind of feed that up to you, knowing that you're probably looking for that, based on analytics and data. So we're trying to do that. So I mentioned we work pretty closely with Wake County. So when I got here, the story I like to tell is I'm in an interview and they threw me a softball, which was, hey, how do you feel about collaboration? We collaborate with Wake County. Right? Home run right there. That's the easiest interview question I've ever had, right? I love collaboration. It's the best thing in the whole world. You can do so much with others, and we can. So day one, I get this meeting request from Wake County that we can't do any, basically, we don't do anything unless Wake County and we in Wake County make a shared decision. So there's a cost to collaboration. But anyway, we collaborate pretty closely, and we share a lot of the same challenges. We have the same kind of business challenges, technology challenges, etc. And while we may look slightly different and have different functions, we're kind of headed in the same direction. So speaking of partnerships, right, we partner with NC State, we partner with ESRI, and in this example, sometimes we're the dog, and sometimes we're the grandmother. But either way, we end up in the same place, right? We end up kind of forward, progress. So I'll let you look at it a couple of things. So I can watch it forever. Again, smart cities. So smart cities is kind of a buzzword, but we're using it as an umbrella to kind of frame our partnership with NC State. So we did a memorandum of understanding with the Chancellor's Office that we're generally going to partner on smart cities initiatives. And some of those initiatives included the thing that Dr. Barron had talked about, which is the Next Century Cities Envision Raleigh project, which I'll show you a little later. It's resulted in us being accepted into the Metro Lab Network, which is a collaboration of cities and institutions from all over the country. That's a somewhat kind of elite club. And so this next slide, I started to put together, and there's other projects that are kind of fell off this page, and I thought that was really interesting. So these are projects that are either completed, that we're working on, or we're kind of framing out. And so again, cities, local governments, we specialize in challenges. We have them all over the place. We need tons and tons of help. We are resource constrained, and for every problem we solve or challenge we make progress on, there's 4 more that are just kind of right behind it, which again is why I work for the city. I love doing it because there's so many different challenges. And so we had a meeting here, I would say maybe 12, 14 months ago, where we had a bunch of people from business units around the city, and we had a number of professors from different colleges within the university. And we went around the room, and basically the city folks, just kind of off the top of their head, said, I'm having a challenge with this. And literally as they stopped talking, a professor would just grab them on the corner, hey, let's talk about that after. I'd really be interested in your pavement condition problem that you have, or, oh, you're having trouble with stormwater management? That's really interesting, blah, 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 blah. Or, oh, you're not getting people onto your buses from your transit system? I think we got something that we'd love to work on with you on that. And that is, that's really the dream of collaboration and partnership. again, I don't mean to say it's a silver bullet, because all of those things, as Dr. Barn had said, require oversight, project management, coordination. You know, there's got to be some kind of skin in the game on both sides, but they're just the opportunities around this sort of engagement and collaboration is kind of endless. So so we talked about doing the Smarter Cities thing, and we applied to, it was called Beyond Traffic Smarter Cities Initiative. One city wins all from the US DOT, $50 million, big deal. And so we put together a proposal that, again, GIS was a strike zone way to kind of share what the vision was around autonomous vehicles and sensors in IoT on our road networks and traffic analytics, etc. So, you know, we were excited about this, but it doesn't, just because we didn't get the $50 million doesn't mean we don't do this stuff. It just means it's just going to take us 50 million times longer to do it. So something that kind of plays into City of Raleigh GIS and innovation is we have a very active civic tech community. So we have organizations like Code for Raleigh, the Raleigh Innovation Center, massive kind of startup community, and so we try as much as possible to engage with this group. And they have a calendar and a circuit of events that happen, and we go to meetups and talk to them about challenges that we're facing, hear about challenges that they're seeing out in the community, and talk about ways that we can either share data, applications, analysis to help drive towards those solutions. This is interesting. I'm going to tell you guys another story, which is, so I got here, the transit manager set up a meeting with me a couple of days after I had started and said, hey, we'd like to do a program where citizens can sign up to volunteer to adopt a bus shelter, and they can do the cleaning and the graffiti removal and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, great. I was like, I felt like when I was doing research, I read that you guys had already done this. And so the local civic tech community had built the application for them, done PR, got a story in the News and Observer, and so they launched it, and it didn't work. And so the transit guy was like, who do I call? These are volunteers. There's nobody. So we just need to figure out what the rules of engagement are around support models, etc. Because when you meet them, right, they're talented, passionate, interested in solving problems. So they're this untapped resource. And so one of the models that we've talked about is, how about I bring projects that we're doing? The city is going to do it. We're going to do an adoption program for bus shelters. If you want, you can help. If you can't, great. Either way, we will support it going forward. So it's more of a collaborative model where the city will take kind of shared support of those solutions. And this is the Civic Tech, right? So on Tuesdays, if Joe's son has soccer practice, he's just not available. He's a volunteer. He's not paid. And so, you know, these people kind of come in and go, and they get passionate about things, and they lose kind of interest. So we need to just think through how these things work and what's the kind of sustainability model around these. So I'm going to do a couple of demos. I'm going to try and show you a couple of demos, which are famous last words. But so is anybody familiar with this? This is IMAP. Yeah. So this is standard kind of civic technology stuff. Every county has it. The thing is that this is a really nice property research application. It is, of all the counties around, this is, I mean, I may be a little biased, but this is the best. It's not maybe the best, it is the best. And again, during my interview process, they asked me what I thought of this. And at the time, the leading thinking around application development was, and it still sort of is break it into the smallest, right? Application should be functional based. Get in, do a function, get out. And this is not that. This is massive. It's got so many functions. And so I talked about how, I thought that it was great, but we should kind of break it into, this should be 30 applications. And then I went out and started talking to the community about that, and they said, yeah, you can do that over my dead body, right? You're not going to change this. This is not going to change. Don't do anything to this. This is, people are really, really passionate about it. And this gets 100,000 visits a month. I mean, it is a well-used application. And if we have any issues, two things happen. My phone buzzes to say, hey, the monitor, our infrastructure monitor noticed that your application is down. And then the next thing is that somebody calls to say, oh my God, what's going on? But it's really all hours of the day and night people are using this, and it's a really valuable kind of core technology, public facing. So this is our development dashboard. So this is a kind of look into our permitting system. And so the story is that there's a window in our office, and you looked out the window and there was a hole in the ground where there was big front end loaders. And I wanted to know what was going there. What's going to be there? I want to see what that is. I want to know, is it going to be a residential house? Is it going to be a tower? Is it business? Is it retail? And I don't think I'm unique in just my curiosity around this stuff. And so this is just there's a couple of use cases. There's this other use case, which is, I hear that banging next door. I wonder if they pulled a permit for that, right? Kind of the nosy neighbor thing. Again, not making judgments, but that is a potential use case for this sort of thing. And so it gives you the ability to kind of look at the permitting, what's in the pipeline, what's being built during date ranges, et cetera. So this, let me do this one first, actually. So this is what you're used to from local government. If I search for NC State, I give you a word wall and 54 links. And good luck. Hope you find what you're looking for. But this is the experience that you're looking for, right? That's what you actually wanted. You wanted to know that I'm 4 minutes from Pullen Park and there's an event on September 1st at the Cultural Center, etc. That's actually probably what you are interested in. If you're interested in the strategic plan, you can still find it in the word wall, but just in general, the expectation is we need to start to add artificial intelligence, add those things to anticipate what you're looking for, and kind of get you that information quickly. So this, I think, will, if you clicked on this, it would bring you here, which is much more interactive, which is, hey, I want to do this, and I want some directions around that. So let's see if this works. Okay, and I want to go do some bocce. And there's only one park that does bocce, and it is 9 minutes away. I can get some directions. Again, this is standard technology outside of local government, right? So we need to start to do this inside of the local government community. If you go to Yelp and pick a restaurant, this is your experience. We need to, as local government, start to use GIS and technology to serve that same sort of experience. So we've kind of been toying with the idea. Let me back up for a second. So the experience over at our call center at our public utilities is that people call and they say, how am I doing for time?
You're fine. 17 minutes.
Okay, good. That people call and say, hey, you didn't pick up my trash. Their expectation is there is a guy who gets into his truck in the morning, drives to their house, picks up their trash, and then takes it to the dump. That is their expectation, right? They don't realize that there's a guy who picks up 45,000 houses of trash. So is there a way that we can kind of share with the community a day in the life to say, hey, listen, yeah, absolutely, your trash is very important to us, but so isn't the other 45,000 people's trash. And so we just kind of played around with, this is the day in the life of kind of our solid waste kind of fleet. And yeah, unfortunately you got this guy who goes out to Winston-Salem for something, and so we need to kind of figure out how to potentially clean that stuff up. But we think that that's potentially a good story to share with the community and tell kind of a city perspective story. Okay, so this is the project that we worked on with Dr. Barron. I don't know if you noticed, but Reynolds has been updating some content and language, etc. And so the idea around this, and I want to give a shout out to Makiko and Riza, is that we would take current conditions. So we have good data around current conditions. So what does Raleigh look like right now? And be able to either allow citizens to develop scenarios based on current zoning. Hey, I want to put a residential building here or a resident mixed-use building here, and what that might look like, as well as potentially find a way to take plan development and be able to kind of inject plan development into that as well. So we bit off the first part of that for this particular engagement, which was let's share it on a platform that people are comfortable with. So and so this is an area that we're doing a plan, is the Nash Square Urban Union Square area. And so this is current conditions. And if I go into scenarios, I'm going to turn those back on, is that I can now
Double click.
What's that? Double click. Thank you. So, you know, so there's this scenario here, and I can potentially just interact with it. I want to add, you know, 13 floors of retail, move down some office. And so, as you can envision, pretty powerful stuff. You can look at vacant property. Did I just? We're still working through it, right? But this is an early prototype. And imagine you being able to, let me just hit this refresh button. You being able to generate scenarios, discover current conditions, potentially turn on planned developments to see what's going on. So this is an example of I might have broke it. So it's going to take a second to load up, but you know, Raleigh Union Station, for instance. So we get CAD drawings for a particular development. We could potentially drop it in. Maybe there might be a couple of different scenarios where they added a busway here, or they did X, Y, and Z. And so this is, again, early prototypes of an interactive tool to allow constituents to be able to wear the hat of a planner or an urban designer from the comfort of their home. So that's kind of my presentation. I'd love questions if you have any.
Thanks, John.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, this InVision application is absolutely fascinating, and it kind of reminds me of like bringing Simcity to life or something like that. Of course, I'm sure you do that all the time, but what I'm wondering is, like, for instance, you showed that map of congestion within Raleigh, and I'm thinking particularly the intersection of Avon Ferry and Western, when you're sending undergraduates across Western Avenue in front of oncoming traffic, and either. So would it be possible in that app to sort of like test out like pedestrian footbridges or drop a tunnel in there, something just sort of beyond maybe like a framework? Maybe?
Sure. So it's funny, we did a kind of a focus group with some city folks to look at feedback around the app, and that was the feedback, was, hey, this is great from a urban design planning perspective, but we got massive traffic problems, we have massive multimodal problems. Is there a way to do that? So I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but from a technology perspective, nothing stopping us other than time and money, which are really, that's not a big deal, right? Those are the easy parts, right?
Right.
So, in the geospatial realm, a lot of this technology is great, and it has a real gee whiz factor. How do you continue to justify your budget? What is the value added that you might take to your boss or to your financial department to say, we need to keep this going, this is the actual benefit that we add, and this is how we can quantify that value added to the city and say, we need to keep this going because it's for the greater good of the city?
Yes. So I have two answers to that. One is there's hard dollars and cents return on investment stuff. And so the city has a stormwater impervious surface tax. And so kind of one of our returns on investment is the city is changing so rapidly that if we do a good job of managing geospatial data, we're able to increase our revenue from our impervious surface tax and, in theory, use that to do other things. The truth is that the gee whiz stuff actually sells the program way more than any hard dollars and cents. So yesterday, the city is going through a massive strategic planning effort. And so we have these core stat meetings, which is basically you sit in front of a panel and talk about your specific initiative. There's 90 initiatives. And so before that, they're trying to do data-driven decisions and key performance indicators and metrics. And one of the things is about non-residential building investments. So how many permits from this, development dashboard. So we've run some analytics on just our permitting system, just spit me out a number. And then they're like, oh, well, we're trying to do focused investments in this particular area. And we can quickly spit out that number. So we go to the core stat meeting, and just as doing that, I just put together a graphic for them and threw it to them, and they threw it in their presentation. And we went going through the presentation, and the city manager, assistant city managers were like, stop. What was that graphic? Stop there. How do we get more of those right? And so that is the value, the indirect value of taking sometimes complex information and making it kind of consumable so that they can make quick, informed decisions. That's really, I think, where we're seeing kind of the biggest growth. If that's helpful at all.
So you live in a very heterogeneous area where we have multiple counties and then multiple towns and cities around it. And there's sometimes the towns cross county boundaries, and so I wanted to ask you about more regional decisions.
Yes.
Where when there's a big project coming up, transportation related or water related, how does the city work with other cities and other counties to plan for large projects? That's the first part of my question. And the second part is that a lot of the stuff that you guys did in Fort City looks really cool, but I know that every other city like Cary, Apex, Durham, they're all trying to achieve the similar, similar things. So is there an effort to kind of unify the data structures that each city use and possibly share these applications among other municipalities to kind of have a uniform experience among all the constituents across the state?
So yes, the answer is sort of yes, but it's really complex and hard. So if we start at the data layer, say we take the data layer, I mentioned we had 150 data sets. Really, in reality, probably 5 of them have national, kind of well-adopted, well-documented standards. The other 145 have, 50 of them have 55 standards. Some of them have no standards. So collaboration is great, but it's hard. So we try and use appropriate kind of discretion to say, hey, listen, we're thinking about adopting this standard, Cary, Apex, Holly Springs, Wake County. What do you guys think about this? Do you guys, if they engage with the conversation and say, no, we'd like to stop and kind of have a bigger discussion, we're happy to do that. But oftentimes, they're like, yeah, do whatever, yeah, go ahead, do that, and we'll adopt that later. Sometimes we don't always do a good job of making those connections, but sometimes we do. So for instance, I mentioned the Civic Technology community. Last year, Wake County, Cary, and Raleigh decided to all adopt this permitting standard called BLDS and publish the data the day before some Civic Tech event so that you could say, hey, listen, you could just ingest all 3 of these data sets and they would be kind of abstracted, the complexity would be abstracted for you. But again, we try and do it where we can, but there isn't always good standards around it. On the application development side, while we try and use open source when we can, we also use some COTS stuff. And so we try and share code, we try and share our best practice. We use a platform called GitHub. So if you went to Raleigh's GitHub, you would see tons of applications. We frequently visit other cities' GitHub accounts and see if they've already have an application to solve a particular problem that we have. So we're trying, but we're not, right? But there's a lot of work to do because what happens is, just like everybody in this room, I'm going to get back to my desk and there's going to be 3,000 emails and 30,000 other things to, you got to stop and kind of step back and say, okay, let's take some time to collaborate, which sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, but yeah.
Can you comment on the state of data silos in Raleigh in particular? And for example, if you parked your car a few blocks away, would the police department be talking to the parking people?
No, they would not. It's sad. I'm sorry. But in Raleigh's defense, the same would happen in Boston as well. So I used to work with a CIO who said, one of the things that we're really good at is building silos, right? That is our natural state. If you went to a city out in the wild and kind of hid behind a bush, they would be in silos. It's just a natural tendency. And we are constantly trying to communicate. Communication is the key to this. It's just making people aware of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how they can get involved.
Have you busted down any silos?
So yeah, definitely. So there is all the IoT stuff. All that is the parking department just bought a meter. That's what they did. They didn't know it reported the status of that, and they didn't care. They had some dashboard, some website that they could go in and just make sure it's working. It would just flash if it didn't accept money, and that's all they really cared about. But when you just so government's about relationships. And so if you just go out and say, hey, I'm here to be helpful, I'd love to learn about what you do and some of the challenges that you have, they say, hey, we have a vendor who installs our parking meters. Do you mind if I just call them and see what they're up to? And then you just find out these amazing things. But for every one of those, there's another one that we haven't uncovered.
At the very beginning of your talk, you mentioned mobile data collection by city employees. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I assume the city isn't issuing 4,000 phones to its employees. So has there been any pushback or there concerns about asking people to use their own devices?
Yes.
For job review?
Yeah, so this is an area that I try and stay away from, which is policy related. And so we have policies around city-issued devices versus we have a program for stipends where we'll pay you for your phone versus BYOD versus XYZ. Generally kind of following up on the relationship stuff. If we looked around the city, there are some departments that have already kind of embraced empowering their staff, and they have, whether it be surfaces or mobile devices, etc. Other departments are a little bit less apt to do that, but we definitely haven't done it across the city. But the city's fairly progressive, and so they're willing to kind of write a check for something that will add value if we can show this return on investment, to say, hey, listen, especially at the city manager's level, he really is focused on data-driven decisions, right? That is kind of the, in technology, we're talking about smart cities. In the city manager's office across the country, there is data-driven decisions, KPIs, metrics, let's make good decisions. And so if we say, hey, if you could just get us 7 devices, or, so one of the things we're trying to do is create like a loaner program. So we have maybe a library of 20 devices that staff could use kind of on a loaner basis. We can kind of quickly deploy apps, collect some data, return them.
What kind of skills are you needing when you hire?
So I actually had this, I was on a panel this morning, and that was one of the questions. And so the 3 I come up with is curiosity, enthusiasm, and willingness, right? Those 3 things are just, you can't replace those things. A little bit of JavaScript and application development would be helpful. But the thing about technology is it's changing so quickly. It's so quickly, right? I'm going to get back to my office and there's going to be 4 articles about something new, that new programming language that no applicant from any pool will ever have, but in 5 years, we will all be coding in it. And so I need someone who's just willing to do something different tomorrow than it was today.
Okay, thank you. I think we can take one more question.
I was just wondering if you had any experience partnering with the private sector for any sort of data gathering. Something that comes to mind is the new line bikes that we're seeing around campus, and that if you could, everyone gets like a route of their, a map of their route that they take, and that could be evidence used to put in bike lanes or complete street policies or something like that to make it more connected.
So are you talking about crowdsourcing?
I don't know.
Okay, so crowdsourcing, right? So,
I think they're actually doing that.
Yeah, we're doing a little bit of crowdsourcing. We're trying to get ideas from the community about what we should be doing, but also collecting a little bit of data. So there's it's called RIDE, which is an application that the city doesn't own, but we subscribe to, that you can download to your phone. You say, hey, I'm going to start my trip. You finish your trip. I like it. This is my suggestion. We have some analytics on the back end. But there's that technology is ripe for that right now. We just need to make sure that if we do that, we are going to listen and do something. So we definitely are sensitive to not, if we're not listening, let's not ask. Right. So we need if we really have some money to make investments in bike lanes or greenways, let's ask the community. But if we don't, let's not just ask just to ask.
Okay, thank you, Gina.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Folks, everybody's invited to social hour. It's going to be right after this. Head right over. We're at Raleigh Brewing Company to keep this discussion going and have a few drinks. So everybody's welcome to come and kick off the semester.
What's that? Yeah, exactly.
Think about it.